There you go. Okay, so this is kind of wrapping up the work that we're doing for tenant observability, and just a demo on how to sort of manage observability configuration in Instrumenter, which has significantly changed. And before we dive into that, we can perhaps look at the context a little bit more. So kind of as a mental model, Tenant Observability Stack is really a Terraform module that you can use, and you basically give it what we call the observability model, which kind of tells us where the configuration is coming from. And then what it produces is basically it installs Prometheus stack, which has the Prometheus operator. It installs observability configuration. This is mostly coming from the metrics catalog. So you will see Prometheus rules, dashboards, and this is kind of half a lie. This is still in progress, the template manifest for capacity planning. And that is being generated and installed into the cluster. And that's kind of the version that we have today. But this is really like a strategic play, kind of. Sort of what we would like to do is move all the observability related pieces from Instrumenter and move that behind Tenant Observability Stack. So really that should become a self-contained module that we can include, and that runs the entire observability stack. So there will be more exporters, capacity planning, error budgets. At some point, we will talk about global observability for cells also. So kind of aggregating across cells and all that.
Are we going to add stuff for logging there? Like if we want to have, like, let's say we have a global aggregator, does the thing that gets it to the global aggregation log aggregator, is that part of the observability stack, or is that something else?
Yes, it should be part of that. In fact, I think we're already working on the FedRAMP related work around logging, and that is also ending up in that module. So ideally, we have a really good, really well-defined interface for observability, and that will be that Terraform module.
Andreas, we've got people in the waiting room.
Oh, I didn't notice. Sorry, let me find my Zoom.
If you make me host, I can also let people in as they come while you're talking.
I think I got it. Thanks. Cool. All right, so this is it should really become the interface for observability, and that should become a self-contained module. And this is going to be the next step for us also to really work on that separation, moving parts from Instrumenter into that module. What we can look at is how you can actually make a configuration change to observability configuration. So how do we change rules and dashboards and alerts and all that? That's something we can look at. There is also documentation available for that. So if you want to look at those couple of pages there, this is kind of what happens under the hood. So kind of the workflow for us making a configuration change. So we would do that in two locations actually that are relevant. So one is Runbooks that has the metrics catalog, really as it used to be before in Instrumenter, just that it is not being rendered into Instrumenter anymore. It is pulled in at runtime. So this is for the get metrics catalog, and then we have a separate repository which we called Tenant Observability Config, which basically has the more specific stuff in there. So what is specific for dedicated or for cells could go in there. That doesn't really fit the the more generic metrics catalog upstream. And those two sources are being pulled in by a tool that we call Config Manager, which is part of that Tenant Observability Stack. So really what we're going to do is
as an illustration, the things that currently go into Tenant Observability Config, is that, for example, where in dedicated we set a flag, this thing uses RDS, and then we get some SLIs for RDS, and then for the cells config we set the GCP flag and we get other things. Is that where that goes?
Yes, that's a part of it. We can look at it in a second. We're actually making exactly a change like that, so we'll see that. So we make those changes, and then basically what we do is we bump the version that this uses. This is part of the tenant model and also the observability model that we push in here. And then config manager detects that, basically does its thing, generates the configuration and installs those resources into the cluster. And this is the change that we can make. So this is in the, can you see that okay? The config repository where we have two changes. So one is a change.
Could you move your Zoom box out of the way a little bit? Yeah,
Yes.
that's better.
Is that okay? So one is a change where we add a mixin. This is a way to basically include dashboards and rules in a very raw way if you'd like to. So you can dump JSON in there. You can also use JSON really, and in the future we can also pull in dependencies from elsewhere. So kind of really leveraging that mixin approach better. That's not yet totally supported. So in this case, we do we add some basic recording rule and also a dashboard, right? So this is adding a new mixin to that config. And the other changes where I was really lazy is I was just copying over a saturation point. So this is the thing you mentioned, Bob. It's in the metrics catalog overrides where we can manage and override and extend sort of the metrics catalog that we have. So in this case, we just add another saturation point, right? And then what we do is basically we go into our tenant model. I have this on disk. I'm just going to do this locally because it's just a lot faster than just waiting for the pipeline to complete. So in my tenant model, this is what's currently rolled out. So this has the overrides version, which corresponds to the config repository version. So this is the release tag for that. And then we use runbooks for the metrics catalog. So there's two sources that we talked about earlier. So this is runbooks and tenant observability config, right? So since that hasn't been merged yet, we can just take the commit char, the long version. So I think what we allow there, we put that in. We basically reload the environment with that new tenant model, and we can also do that on the MR by overriding that in the tenant model. Cool, and then we apply Terraform. So this only needs the configure stage to roll out, and we should basically see config manager to start. So just remember, this is that job, right? So it should basically know that the configuration has changed. It needs to fetch those changes and needs to regenerate the configuration and install that. That's what's happening at the top. And while we wait for that, we can take a look at how those resources are being managed. So this is from the Prometheus operator. We see those resources installed, right? So those are the existing ones, and then we should expect to see, the mixin that we added should pop up here. And we also have config maps for the dashboards also here, and there should be an additional dashboard from that as well. And then we can also observe the job that's running, takes a minute or two. And the idea there is, this is really basic currently, like it's, Terraform is just executing that Kubernetes job, but this can really become a operator pattern where Terraform would only really update the model that we push in. So basically just changing that version in the config map, and then the operator would detect that and do that in the background for us.
While we're waiting, could you show the complete observability model with this? I think you might have.
The one on disk,
Like the-
right?
Yeah, the one on disk that we're currently working on.
Let's see, that should be a part of the Terraform update as well. This is it basically. So we have the metrics catalog with the overrides, right? We just changed that SHA here.
Right. So this YAML is managed by Terraform.
Yes. Yes, this is, or it's the JSON part in Instrumenter that sort of generates it. So there's the tenant model that only has those 2 version tags. And then based on that, we generate the observability model. And that also has a list of mixins that we would like to enable, which is something that I skimmed over, actually. So
yeah. Also, like what I didn't see in the Terraform config where you just updated things, like how do you add an override, like a new one, like I want a completely new repository or a new directory in that existing repository. How does that work?
So in terms of the overrides, there is only supposed to be one currently, really. I think it only makes sense to have one. You could have multiple ones, and there's maybe an opportunity to do tenant-specific overrides. But we're kind of getting in the woods there, I think, a little bit.
Yeah. I just like that's I think it's a fair decision to have made. Like, but then I will repeat the question for mixins then.
Yeah, that's a good one. You can actually do that. So there's you can see this on the left here. So there's a list of sources that you can put for mixins, and those are currently Git based. So you can add as many sources as you would like. Just pointing to a repository with a particular tag, which that isn't. So maybe I should update that.
And how does that look inside the Terraform to add more of those?
This is, so you will have to also supply a list of mixins that you would like to enable. So in this case, it's only global dashboards. In our case here, going back to the tenant observability model that we looked at, there is 3, right? So we added our shiny new mixin here. And there is a few locations where this happens. In this case, there is a common JSONet file in Instrumenter that basically has all the global observability mixins. So the ones that are basically applicable for both GCP and AWS. So you would add it there. You can also do that predicate based. So maybe let's take a look at this more. So this is the list of mixins that gets enabled if their predicate matches, and we have things like, oh, is this a geo secondary? And then in that case, we will also add the geo mixin, right? We've just added our mixin with always enabled. You can also do that by cloud provider, whatever is needed, really. And there is the same thing exists for the AWS mixins and the GCP mixins. So whenever you have something that's specific to either of the cloud providers, then there's a separate list for each of them, but it works similar. Does that answer your question, Bob?
Yes, I think it does. Which repository is this living in? Is that inside the tenant?
Oh, that's
wherever the tenant config lives?
That's Instrumenter itself.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. So maybe let's go back here. So we've applied our change. Config manager job has done its thing. So we should be able to see a new dashboard. So this is Grafana. And then we have the great mixin dashboard here, which has some random data in it. So this is the recording rule that we added and has that. You can also see that here, hopefully. So there's that metric that just started, right? On the cluster, that looks like this. So there's Prometheus rule that has a resource for that mixin, right? So if you go in here, then we also see that recording rule here, equivalent for the dashboard really. And the other change that we wanted to see was related to the saturation point that we copied over, right? So remember this one, right? So what we should see, we can maybe just look in Prometheus at something like this. And it's also started at around the same time, right? So this is for that saturation point. Cool. That's in essence how we're now making changes to observability configuration. The metrics catalog itself is still in Instrumenter, so we haven't fully removed it from Instrumenter itself. The only reason for that is the template manifest that is still coming from that for AWS, but it's really the last piece, and we shouldn't have any Prometheus rules, alerts, dashboards in the Instrumenter codebase anymore. And that should all go into the two repositories that we just looked at.
How, like one of the reasons we did this is to be able to reuse it for cells, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where is this configuration that we can currently see on the right going to live for a cell?
So a cell is really just a GCP tenant, right? So very, very similar to GitLab Dedicated, which is currently on AWS. Cells is currently on GCP, so it's very, very much the same configuration in that sense.
So this would just be an addition to where the tenant model is stored for the cells, correct?
What do you mean exactly? Like what configuration?
So the tenant model that you were showcasing earlier that showed the intake of the observability stack here.
Mm-hmm.
My imagination says that we'll just need to replicate that inside of our tenant models where the cells are defined, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you can use the default and you get whatever Instrumenter has basically. Or you can override the versions. And this is also something that we would like to do at some point, is being able to ship customized observability configuration for cells, different sizes of cells. Dedicated customers might have the same need really to have a different configuration.
So what components does this observability stack provide that the existing one does not? Or are we trying to, like if I'm thinking of all the various exporters, I know we've had to create them inside of Instrumenter in order to activate the ability to scrape those metrics.
Mm-hmm.
Where is there overlap, and like how do we disable one to enable the other? Like how do we disable the one in Instrumenter so we could leverage what's being brought in from this observability stack here?
So what we are doing is really moving stuff from Instrumenter into that module, kind of one by one. So ideally, we would continue to do that. Like, currently there is not a clear boundary between Instrumenter and the module if you look at it, right? So the configuration is now maintained like we just talked about. But a bunch of exporters are still in Instrumenter. There's buckets and roles created in Instrumenter, and all that relates to observability and should be done by that module. So ideally, we continue work on this. So this is the epic that I linked to produce a self-contained observability stack. And I think this is really, really an organizational issue also, because it would allow us as sort of the observability team to work on the entire stack without always having to do an Instrumenter change. So ideally, for example, we will be able to work on upgrading Prometheus stack, which historically has been a little bit difficult, kind of do that on the side. So inside that module that we maintain, do all the proper testing and all of those things, and then in Instrumentor that would only become a version bump to use the latest version of the module. And I like to think that's really a lot of there is a lot of organizational reasoning behind doing that, I think.
And then things like John mentioned exporters, like what if the application needs a Redis exporter?
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that is included in the observability stack, or does it come from somewhere else? Like right now, it's an instrument, right? I guess. Does it move out of there and into the observability stack or elsewhere?
I think I think I would move all the things that can be reasonably moved around so that are generic enough to move into the observability stack, right? So if there's something very specific to a certain edge case, then maybe that's not moving. Redis exporter, I guess that's quite a standard thing for the environment. So we would move that around. I think the integration point that we would have is using things like scrape configs and service monitors so that we can sort of decouple that the observability stack doesn't have to know about all the exporters that are being installed. So we could still do both things, but ideally a lot of stuff will move around, I think.
Is there a matrix that showcases which parts have currently been moved over and which ones are still missing, ones that just simply haven't been worked on yet?
Not really. We have a bit of an overview. I moved this somewhere else. No, we don't. So I think what we've done so far is really concentrate on the configuration and where that is being generated.
Yeah, metrics catalog mostly.
Right. There is 2 exporters that just happened to move while we made that. But other than that, nothing has been moved around. So we should probably get that overview updated. And I'll put it in that epic here.
So I've created at least one issue where we've got metrics that are missing from GCP. Should I be trying to encourage that we leverage this mechanism? Because currently I didn't really specify, hey, we should try to integrate this inside of Instrumentor, or say just activate this in Instrumentor. Maybe we should try to pull this over into this observability stack and start from there. I kind of created just a generic issue, just to note that we were missing metrics for a certain target piece of infrastructure.
Is that a breakage or why?
No, it's just something that hasn't been implemented for the GCP infrastructure yet.
Yeah, that should really leverage those mechanics. That will make sense. Yeah.
Excellent.
And I recall you also created an issue around breaking Prometheus, I think, instances and all that in cells. That's something that we should also look at. We were just figuring out the permissions issue on how we can actually get access to those environments.
Yeah.
Cool.
This is excellent, man.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Thanks. Thanks for the questions. And
So,
I think
so now that we've got it out, can we migrate Prometheus stack to Mimir?
that should be a goal, really.
I think so, but let's not do it now.
No. But we can do, like, this is also in preparation for global observability, for example, since you mentioned Mimir. What we should do at some point, and this is the refactoring that we're doing, is really a preparation for that. So, we should talk about the global observability aspects across tenants, and how can we...
This is exactly what I had in mind for that. So every cell just has Prometheus remote write it to Mimir in its own tenant.
Right. And quite likely, I think we would also want to manage aspects here in that same module. So I really like that idea of creating that single entry point into the observability stack and manage things from there. But this is where we should get to, and the refactoring work that we talked about, so moving things from Instrumenter into that module, I think this is really crucial for us to make that happen. So ideally, we would be in a situation where we can make all of this happen without touching Instrumenter. So we would just, add that functionality to that stack, get that included, and be done with it. And this is also going to speed us up considerably. Like I feel like the changes that we made that we just looked at, they took a long time, and I think a good part of that was due to having to work in Instrumenter and extracting things out. And then now, if we have things separated out nicely enough, then we can actually ship those changes faster, I think. Cool. Any more questions?
When can I start using this for cells?
Right away, actually.
Oh, nice. Perfect.
Yes, that
Do
works
we
for
have
GCP and
implementation
AWS the
details
same
anywhere?
way. Which parts to make a change? Or
just how to enable it?
So my plan was to get the permissions for cells, so I can figure out how you actually use cells. So maybe we should sync up on that.
Let's do
I'm not really
that,
sure how you use it. I can show you how that works in a sandbox, but I'm not sure about cells. But in essence, you'll get the stack automatically for GCP tenants, and you can do all of those things.
Perfect.
So I'll ping you back in a couple of days, hopefully.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Cool. All right. Thanks for the questions.
Thank you for showing.
Sure. Have a good day.